All right. Today's discussion centers around Mexico and its political economy. But we are going to put that in the larger context of what we call development. Now, development can be described by many of the things that are considered characteristics of development. The developed country as a developed system of infrastructure. It has roads, it has electricity, it has clean water, it has an education system such that its population is mostly literate, it is largely free from epidemic diseases, it does not suffer from starvation. Those are some of the indicators of development. And it's something that most of the Western world enjoys. However, going back to the past, it's true that not much of the world enjoyed those conditions in the past. And it wasn't something that the Western European countries worried about very much before the World War II. They were usually established in relationship of colonialism, and there wasn't any kind of idea that their colonies would need to be developed or not. There was a natural order, they believed, and the colonies existed to serve the expansion, strength, development of those home countries. But there wasn't this question of development, which really only became important after World War II, when many of these countries started to become independent. I mean, in the context of colonies, no longer part of colonial systems, and instead it was the West and the socialist East. Here, when I am referring to socialist East, it's obviously Russia in competition for the loyalty and alliance with those countries which became independent, which were previously colonies. Now, those two blocks, economic or ideological blocks, had different points of view on how development would be achieved. Then again, there was this idea that all countries now should become developed partially to appease those countries that had become independent. You didn't want to say, hey, our solution is befriend us and don't become developed. That was not an option. But instead, there was this competition now, which was the best model for becoming developed. Now, the idea is coming from the West, right? So, from US and from Western Europe largely. They go under the name called modernization, or modernization theory. And here there was an idea that, okay, certain institutions have to be in place. Maybe democracy, probably not. But what was probably very important was being dedicated to free trade, right? This understanding that countries should remain integrated in a global economy. If there were colonies previously, they should probably still continue trading with the West and still producing many of the same kind of goods that the West did, with the idea that if you work hard, if you cooperate, there can be great gains for you. You will slowly develop. British say, look at us. It took us a while to develop. You can do it, Nigeria. Just follow in our footsteps. But the first step here is to not isolate yourself, but to follow the model that we have. Open up yourself to free trade, and also you need to have what we should say positive attitude, right? Kind of this idea, maybe the Protestant work ethic and things like that. You need to be prepared to make some sacrifices in order to achieve economic development. Um, so there was this idea that there is institution but go hand in hand with that go hand in hand with the attitudes and a dedication to things the way the West had already established. Now, this idea faced a lot of backlash, and it came from political scientists and economists who had much more of a Marxist philosophy. And when I talk about Marxist philosophy, there is this idea with Marxism that society is set up between the capitalist and a working class, the proletariat, and that the capitalists exploit the working class, that it's an unfair relationship that is created. And again, it is an exploitative relationship, and one of the solution for Karl Marx, at least, the Marxism itself is just simply described society as being that way. The Marxist view of Karl Marx also pushed for an end to the capitalist system as it existed and for there to be a dictatorship of proletariat in that means working class taking control, and everybody would have a equal equality of rights. There is a political program here, but looking at it purely descriptively and analytically, analyzing it in the eyes of the Marxists, they were saying that there is this inequality that exists within the society. Well, dependency theory said, well, it's not just within the society, it's such as like it's not within a country such as Brazil that would have richer and poorer people, and that one prey on the other. But they say that entire world system is a kind of set up that way. There are advanced industrialized countries, you know, what they label as core, the core countries, and there is this periphery of countries, and the core basically tells you subscribe to capitalism, engage in free trade, do what you can do best, which might be producing raw materials, your raw resources, exporting those things, whatever it is, agriculture or mineral, fuels or things of that order, and you will be able to enter into a good situation of trade, which over time will allow you to become development, right? That's modernization theory. Now, the world systems theory say no, no. This kind of relationship is exploitative in the same way as within the society between capitalist and the proletariat. But it's a relationship between a core which preys on the periphery and make sure that it never becomes developed. It wants to make sure that it just receives the raw material from its former colonies, but the developing world, and then process them in the developed world, in the first world, right? Turning iron into cars, turning rubber into tires, and then sending back to the developing world at a much higher price. And in that kind of relationship, sure, the developing world makes some money by selling off its resources, but it spends so much more rebuying those goods once they are processed. And so the distance between the developed, the core, and the periphery only gets wider. It only gets wider. So the dependency theory said, okay, no, drop out of this relationship. Drop out of this relationship. It's an unfair relationship and you will never be able to catch up. Now, again, communist countries were saying, yes, yes, capitalist is a bad system, drop out of this. But to be honest, they didn't have much of a solution either. They were simply saying, institute socialism in your country, greater equality, having the state owned means of production, those kind of things. That was what communist countries were saying. But lot of things, there was a lot of exploitation going on there as well within the communist society, between the core and the periphery around Russia, and that was preying on poor republic as well. So it was not like they had completely skirted this issue as well. Well, the solution that was of often being prescribed is saying there are some paths that you can take. Some you can get to development, despite being a country that starts off on a periphery, and it doesn't have to be simply opening up yourself to free trade. The solutions that were offered by um, some of the economists uh, was the first one, something called the import substitution industrialization, ISI. Also, we call this as ISI, which simply means you take those things that you are importing from other countries. So maybe you are importing cars or refrigerator or jeans from the developed world, from the advanced industrialized world. Well, instead, you substitute those out. Instead of importing those things at a very high price, you try to make those within your own country. And of course, that is very, very difficult because you may lack the know-how, or even if you have the know-how, it's probably costs more to produce it in your own countries like Honduras or Ghana. It costs to make a car or blue jeans than having the US export those things into those countries. And so, what you gonna need to be able to do is to cut yourself off from the free world, set up some very high tariffs to protect yourself and to protect your industry, then slowly protect it from the outside global competition. Your own industry will start to grow now. Now, of course, this comes at a tremendous price to the consumer because at the beginning they are going to be getting products that are probably of worst quality and that cost a lot of money to make. But at least you have maintained your independence, and at least you have maintained your independence. This is probably not what the way to go either if you want to have a fast economic growth, because it will take an awful lot of long time, because at first you will not be very productive. The second path, which might be taken by the periphery to become a developed, is called anthropo. Anthropo, it's a French word which simply means rather than actually producing things, you become a place where people bring their businesses, maybe a store goods. A classic example of anthropo could be certain world cities like Hong Kong, Singapore, Hamburg, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, where they may be they don't produce an awful lot of things, but they have a lot of space and they charge a lot of money because they are able to store those things. A lot of business deals happen there, and there will be a banking center there. And that's one way to get yourself from being developing country as Singapore or Hong Kong was to become an advanced industrialized country, which in the end, like Hong Kong, actually ended up manufacturing a lot. But initially, it was just a hub for trade. So that might be another solution. Again, uh, seems to work very well for small units, large cities and like. And it may not be a solution for an entire country. So the final solution which they suggest for the periphery is that you pursue what we call export-led growth. And that simply means try to find ways to make certain things that world wants and start exporting. That way you are going to have much more faster growth. Now the problem is if you're going to still grow and follow an ISI model, then you are not letting other people goods in.